Sir Keir Starmer has unveiled his party's plan to tackle the Channel migrant crisis, pledging to set up special fast-track Nightingale courts to tackle asylum backlog applications and attempting to negotiate a deal with the EU in return for smashing the smuggling gangs. It comes as the new GBNews People's poll found that 68% of Conservatives and 67% of Leavers think immigration has made crime worse, as do nearly half of all voters, fueling concerns about Britain's migration troubles. I am joined now by Michael Fabricant, Conservative MP for Lichfield. Michael, always a pleasure to see you. Has Keir Starmer secured, or scored even, a massive political own goal here, or actually is he onto something?
I wonder whether he actually believes any of it himself. He went for a meeting, as you said, in The Hague. The European Union themselves can't agree on actually how many people each country should take. He's now saying, oh, I can do a deal with the European Union because I'm prepared to speak to them. The European officials are now briefing that he is deluded because they can't get an agreement within themselves. They're certainly not going to get an agreement with a country outside the EU, the United Kingdom. And even if he got an agreement, what would it mean? It would mean that we'd be taking in, as part of that agreement, always assuming there was an agreement, 100 to 120,000 immigrants that the European Union want to dump on us. And if people aren't included in that list and they're on the camps in tents in Calais, they're still going to come across by boat. So he's got no solution whatsoever.
Look, there is a chance that it's actually going to increase the number of people that we end up taking, but also that Europe takes as a whole. Because if people know that they only have to find the money to get from Africa to Lampedusa, then actually they don't then have to find more money to travel across the continent and then pay a human trafficker to get them across the channel. So, realistically, it could end up leading to more migrants coming across, which I don't think anyone would think would be a particularly great thing, because we would still have the problem, Michael, wouldn't we, of the taxpayer having to pay for these people to live somewhere. So that's not being solved, is it?
That's right. That's right. And, you know, every time we have tried to do something in Parliament, like have a real deterrent by being able to send them off to Rwanda or wherever, every time we do that, Keir Starmer, almost forgot his name there, Keir Starmer and his motley crew opposite vote against it. I mean, as one of your specialists said on GBNews this morning, the Conservatives at the moment have not succeeded in stopping the boats because, of course, we haven't been able to send them off to Rwanda, but at least the Conservatives are trying. And he says the problem with Labour is they don't even want to try. They want the immigrants to come here, regardless of whether or not they're being persecuted or whether, in fact, they just choose to come here.
So, look, do you think that there is something deliberate? Keir Starmer will say, I want to stop the Channel migrant crisis, I want to create a safe and legal route. These are some people's priorities, therefore that is what this would do. So, you know, is he onto something there? I mean, is that something that you think, you know, people could actually get behind and screw the numbers? We'll take more, but as long as we've not got people drowning in the Channel and I can say the safe and legal routes, that's enough.
Well, I think anybody who actually believes what Keir Starmer is actually saying has to be incredibly naive or a very, very red socialist indeed and doesn't really care what he says. The point is, you know, you've got Yvette Cooper spouting on that she's going to take an extra 1,000 experts in order to deal with the number of migrants who have come over here, so there isn't a backlog. She doesn't say where she's going to get these 1,000 experts from. And what is going to happen? Either they will be agreed to that they can stay here, and they probably will under a Labour government, or they'll have to be sent back somewhere. But
the thing is, I do wonder though, Michael. I mean, I've made my views on Keir Starmer's migrant policy pretty flipping clear, right? But I do wonder whether or not the Tories have given him an absolute gift, because there's two factors at play here, which is that, as far as I can tell at the moment, basically everybody's staying anyway under a Conservative government, and B, you know, you've been in power for 13 years and we're in a mess. So could it be that much worse? And he has those things on his side, doesn't he? He can now, despite never wanting to be seen anywhere near Tony Blair, because people don't want to call him Tony Blair 2.0, he can go to Brussels, he can go to The Hague, go to the EU, talk to them, meet Macron, do something that is essentially dragging us back into the European Union and still back his chances of winning an election.
Well, I mean, that's exactly the argument. Of course, he's saying, well, they've been there 13 years. Come on, I might be useless, but you know what? I won't be any more useless than the Tories. And that's more or less what he's saying. Actually, it's only been the last 4 or 5 years that the people traffickers have been sending the boats across, and we've been trying very hard to stop it. And as I've said to you before, Patrick, actually the French police have stopped about half the movements across the English Channel, but that's still a half too much who are coming over here. The problem is he's not coming up with any solutions, and every time we come up with a solution, like the very real threat of sending them to Rwanda and other countries, he votes against it. I actually think he wants them over here.
Do you think there's part of a plan then? Do you think why would Keir Starmer actively want 100 to 180,000 people a year as part of an EU quota scheme?
I think he simply thinks that by going over to The Hague, saying rather naive, silly statements like, oh, you know, the other day, by the way, he said, I would actually negotiate with Europe. Oh, yeah. The Conservatives are not talking to of course we're talking to the European Union. We talk with them all the time. And we know full well the European Union can't do a deal. They're not able to do a deal. But of course he does his little soundbite and says, I'll do a deal, as if we're not doing anything at all.
The benefit to come out of it, Michael,
the general election.
As you were alluding to there, the absolute benefit that has come out of this, which is that it's highlighted again some of the inner turmoil in the European Union. You've got Hungary and Poland saying we want no part of an asylum seeker quota. Italy's just welcomed 8,000 people, mostly from Africa, mostly men, on the island of Lampedusa in the last couple of days. France and Germany are saying we actually don't want to take anyone from Italy because we don't think they're doing their bit, which I imagine the people of Italy would laugh at, really, the idea they're not doing enough. And alas, here we go. Michael, thank you very, very much. Michael Fabricant, there, Conservative MP.
Thank you.